It's an enormous privilege for us, all of us in Israel and around the world, to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, somebody also that all of us in the English language have been turning to time and time again to be a voice of clarity, a voice, a previous speaker of the IDF, speaking to us all around the world and just making sense in debate after debate, not only being a speaker. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, we've seen you in debates as well, difficult debates, not only holding your own, but really so proudly, clearly speaking about not only the justness of our cause, but what it means today to have a state of Israel and to do the military actions that we're doing. And it really has been a blessing that you have also stepped up as one of those voices today who constantly reminds us of what it means to have a state of Israel and the justness of these military actions. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, so much has happened in the last 10 days. Who would have imagined? You know, when we planned to have this, none of us thought we'd be talking about what happened yesterday. We hoped and prayed. But in the last 10 days, how it began 10 days ago on a Thursday evening, how it's continued last night in the United States. Help us to make sense of this. Help us to formulate this in some type of military and diplomatic terms, what's going on today. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Conricus, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. I hope you can hear me clearly.
I can hear you clearly.
Earphones, so you don't get feedback. That's what I have here, the little thing. But
we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Always a tremendous. I really appreciate the ability to be on. It's a tough act to follow, Natasha and Colonel Kemp. I don't know that that I can, but I will offer my 2 cents and how I reflect on the situation. So I'll try not to say the obvious because I think everybody listening are abreast with recent developments, and I'll try to make a few observations that perhaps will put things into perspective. I think a major issue that we have is that the Iranian regime is now struggling with its decision making, and like so many other non-democracies, so many other tyrannical regimes, they're not good at adapting to a changing environment. For many years, one could say 2.5 decades, the Iranian regime was on the offensive. They were the ones defining strategy. They were the ones implementing it. They were the ones attacking Israel and shaping our borders and attacking us indirectly through proxies. They didn't face a lot of pushback, and they didn't face a lot of consequences back home. And they probably felt that they could continue building proxies, continue attacking Israel, continue calling for the destruction of the state of Israel, and continue trying to build the weapons that would give them the ability to destroy the state of Israel, specifically nuclear weapons. Now that reality has changed fundamentally, thanks to the actions of Israel and thanks to the, I'd say, completing actions of the US. And I see that the Iranians are really struggling to understand the depth of the complexity of the situation that they're in. And they continue to make strategic mistakes in terms of how they message and in terms of how they act on the ground. And there's an old truism, an old saying in military affairs that when your enemy is making mistakes, don't interrupt him. And I don't think that we should be interrupting the Iranians from making mistakes, but I would advise, caution. They've had lots of off-ramps and lots of abilities to really get themselves out of major trouble, but they've each fork in the road, they've taken the other option of escalation, probably motivated by pride and by ego and not by strategic wisdom. They could have decided on the 13th and 14th not to retaliate forcefully against Israel because they were really dealt a severe blow, and they could have decided to, forfeit their nuclear weapons program and safeguard their regime. They did not. They started firing massive amounts of ballistic missiles at Israel, and every time that they've had the option, they have continued with escalation. Now, their military situation doesn't allow them and doesn't give them a lot of options to dictate events. Yes, they still have military capabilities. Yes, they still have ballistic missiles. Yes, they still have naval forces. And yes, they still have a few of their proxies left more or less intact. And they still have overseas terror capabilities of hitting soft Israeli or Jewish or American targets around the world. And maybe other surprises. But at the end of the day, when you take stock of the military situation, they're in a corner. They don't have a lot of military options, and whatever they do to escalate, a few hours ago, the legislative body of Iran approved closing the Straits of Hormuz. I think that would be a magnificent mistake. That would open up naval forces and all other Iranian forces to tremendous direct attacks by US and probably Israeli aircraft. And I think it would be an exercise, a futile exercise. But, if they want to do it, fine, do it. And then they will face the consequences. But that's one key issue that I think is very important. Two, without getting ahead of ourselves, I think if I make a comparison to the world of gambling, casinos, I'm sure that nobody ever gambled of those who are listening to this, but you've seen movies. So we're now at the table. And if we compare the table to the area of military action, we've been betting, and we've been managing our hand quite well. And now we have a nice pile of money, nice pile of chips at our table. But we haven't cashed out yet. Cashing out is the diplomatic part. Cashing out means deciding to leave the table and then going towards the cashier and then actually getting the money. That period of time, the diplomatic realm, is where the Iranians, historically speaking, are very, very good. Very shrewd, very cunning, patient, and usually very good at turning military setbacks into strategic achievements. And I would advocate for a word of caution in that aspect, because this could yet be turned on its head, even though militarily speaking it's an overwhelming and one-sided victory for Israel and the US, and as Colonel Kemp said, for the free world, and I very much agree. But we're not there yet. A third thing, which I think we have to speak about and acknowledge, is that there are open and stated goals, and then there's the elephant in the room, or the elephant in the Iranian bazaar, and that is regime change. The open goals of Israel are to, of course, eradicate the nuclear program, and then to deal with, and parallel to that, to deal with their missile capabilities towards Israel. And third, to minimize Iran's ability to continue funding terror organizations that are trying to kill Israelis. Those are the three main goals stated. But Israel also wishes to see the Iranian regime relegated to the dustbin of history. How can that happen? Who can set that into motion? And what are the contingencies for that? Very unclear. I don't know, and I'm not entirely sure that there is a clear, comprehensive Israeli strategy for that matter. And of course, history teaches us, recent post-World War II history in the Middle East specifically, that the whole business of nation building, regime change, etc., extremely messy, resource intense, and very low chances of success, and that it's an uncontrolled event. It's basically a fragmentation grenade. You can set it up and you can hope that it explodes in the right direction. Many cases it doesn't. And the situation with Iran is quite a difficult one because there's no opposition internally. The regime has made that very clear and undermined it over the years. And there's no real structure to support it, and it will take time. So, of course, I would want to see, for the benefit of Iranians, the region, and most importantly for Israel, I would want to see that regime overthrown by the Iranian people. But I think we have to manage our expectations here and be realistic about it. A, it's going to be messy. B, the outcome is really unclear. And C, very important, neither the mighty US nor little but mighty Israel will really have an ability to control the outcome. And I think that's very important when we look ahead. A few other reflections that I have that I think people will enjoy. I wouldn't have bet on Iran being left so alone. Not regarding their proxies and not regarding their international bedfellows, the other rogue nations of the world, Russia and China, but their proxies, specifically Hezbollah, the fact that that Tehran picked up the phone and called Beirut, and Beirut answered that, listen, I like you, my friend, but I'm busy, don't call again. Tremendous disappointment and heartbreak for the Iranians. I cannot overstate how important that is. And for 15, 20 years, Hezbollah's rockets and missiles that were aimed towards Israel were the main deterring factor against Israel for doing exactly what Israel started doing on June the 13th. And that's a very big win. And of course, we can draw a direct line between the Iranian-funded and Iranian incentivized attack on October the 7th by Hamas and then the rest of the Iranian proxies until today. And when you look at things from an Iranian perspective, this was not a good gamble and not a good strategy and a terrible understanding of underestimation of Israeli capacity to fight, to defend itself, and also of Israeli military prowess and leadership to withstand the attacks of the Iranian proxy. Last thing, I'd say that we still have unfinished business of significant importance in Gaza. We still have 50 hostages left. 20 of them are presumed alive. 3 bodies were extracted home over the last few days, and now it's been made official. And the war still continues there. Hamas has not yet been defeated, and we have to defeat Hamas. We have to achieve complete victory there, and before we can go on to the next stages. Victory, by the way, and I think people here as spiritual and God-fearing people, it's not about military. It's not about killing the enemy. It's not about taking out the Khamenei or Hassan Nasrallah or Yahya Sinwar and his brothers and his successor. That's important. But real victory is when the kindergarten in Nachal Oz and Be'eri are again full of Jewish children, and when the communities are rebuilt, and when there's positive growth of the Jewish population. That's the real victory, and that will take time. But in order to get to that situation when it's safe enough for Israelis to live and prosper there, and when people feel safe enough to come back, build, and flourish in that area, for that to happen, we have to first defeat Hamas. And Hamas is, I think, on a dead end, a dead strategic end. They are, I think, holding on to the last hostage, holding on to the last Palestinian, and I don't think that they're making any strategic sense, but they look as if they want to, do a suicide mission. There's no strategic sense in what they're doing. They have no way of winning, but they're holding on. Last word, Israel, through the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, is now delivering food. More than 13 million meals have been provided by the Gaza Humanitarian Fund in the last 2.5 weeks, and that system is working. To the surprise and disappointment of the UN, of Hamas, many donor countries in Europe, and many Arab states, what Israel is doing is working, and it is really prying the hands of Hamas from the population. And that's a step in the right direction, not enough. And I think we still have one peak of military operations ahead of us before we can defeat Hamas. But as I've said over the last 1.5 years since I took off my uniform, I am hopeful. I have faith in the IDF. I have faith in our ability in Am Israel, in our ability to be steadfast and continue and fight the battle, because we are fighting the most justified battle that there ever was in our history. And I am confident that we will defeat Hamas and we will finish business with Hezbollah, just as we have now demonstrated with the Iranians. Again, not there yet, but progress in the right direction.
Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, that was really unbelievable. I have actually many questions, but we're going to leave it here because this is more a time for, maybe I'll just ask you one, because I know we want to end with a number of prayers that we want to say for the wounded and for the fallen and for our soldiers, but perhaps one. You described the complexity of that. On the one hand, it seems to be stemming from Iranian irrationality, arrogance, just escalating, which is really exposing them more. But on the other side, they know how to cash in even on military losses. So it's quite complex. In your opinion, we obviously know nobody knows how it's going to unfold because it's, too many variables. How, in your opinion, can you see a way that you would assess it playing out in the coming weeks with what Iran will do? Are they capable of really shutting down not forever, but shutting down totally their nuclear aspirations, or is that something they're incapable of, and therefore will have to find a way to keep it going? What is your assessment, in short, in a minute or two, of how you see it going forward.
I would be very happy to read a prayer, Tefillah L'Shlom Chayalei Tzahal afterwards, if that would be possible. I would be greatly honored. I do it every Friday at home with my children, with Kiddush, and I've said it in many synagogues around the world, so I would be very happy. Nothing is more meaningful. Shortly, it looks as if they are continuing to make mistakes. Closing the Straits of Hormuz would be a tremendous mistake. If they do it, that would escalate the situation further, and then Israel would be able to strike more targets of national importance in Iran. One of the problems with dictatorships is that, once they have committed to a strategy, a long-term strategy, it's very difficult for them to change and to climb down the tree, because they've built so much into the ethos of achieving that. And from an Iranian perspective, destroying Israel has been that. Fighting Israel and helping the Palestinians, so-called, has been what they've been busy doing, and they have invested trillions or at least many, many billions of dollars in that. So I think it will be very challenging for them to, drink 2 or 3 glasses of cold water and think rationally. What's at stake here, and how can we perhaps de-escalate this and prevent this from going further and endangering the regime? So far, it looks as if they're not understanding the gravity, and their hubris is getting the best of them.
Thank you very much for that, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus. The truth is, the rest of our program, we have some of the rabbis saying the prayers, but we actually have a beautiful video of a young boy, Nerio Granot, singing with innocence and purity the prayer for the welfare of the state, for the welfare of the soldiers. Otherwise, we would most certainly ask you to do it. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
I'm sure a singing boy is much better, but you can believe me that this is something that I have extremely close to my heart. I am so thankful for the brave men and women of the IDF in the air, at sea, on the ground, underground, who continue to defend our homeland, who continue to be heroes of the Jewish people. We owe them so much, and I am extremely proud to once have been part of that fighting force. So I'm very thankful also for your support, everybody watching, and you, sir, for leading this. This is tremendously important, and now we're at a high, at the peak. We're all happy. We're feeling the achievement, and we're seeing many, many years of hard work and commitment come into fruition. And we should indeed be proud of our boys and girls in uniform, and we should be thankful for the good decisions done by the Israeli government, by the diplomatic capacity to harness the power of our allies, and by the good fortunes and protection from above.
Thank you. And I want to just say in conclusion with you to say that it's how privileged we are to live in a generation where one of our most articulate diplomatic spokespeople is able to unapologetically say a prayer for the welfare of the state of Israel, that the military, diplomatic, political, and spiritual, somehow the Jewish people are all intertwined. God bless you, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, and continue your holy work of framing for us and explaining to us everything that we're going through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.